Diddy trial day 23. Kanye was blocked from court. Then the testimony exposed why Diddy feared him. The courthouse was quieter than usual that morning. A slow fog hung over Foley Square, wrapping around the iron fencing and cold stone walls of the federal building like a warning. The streets were already lined with news vans. Cameramen adjusted their lenses. Reporters rehearsed their live stand-ups, waiting for anything new. This was day 23 of the federal trial against Sean Diddy Combs, now accused of racketeering, coercion, and trafficking, a case that had already stunned the nation with allegations of power abuse, secret recordings, and the kind of details that rarely make it past an entertainment headline. The atmosphere outside had become routine, familiar even, until 9:47 a.m. That's when the black Maybach pulled up. It didn't roll in with sirens. It didn't rush. It glided quiet, smooth, and deliberate before stopping directly in front of the courthouse's main security checkpoint. Security guards on duty stiffened. Reporters turned. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the rear passenger door opened, and out stepped Ye. Kanye West, now legally known as Ye, emerged dressed entirely in white. A white, oversized hoodie, white tactical pants, white sneakers. Even his sunglasses had a pale mirrored sheen. It was a look that contrasted sharply with the gray stone behind him and the gravity of the building he approached. His presence felt both ghostly and prophetic, like someone showing up to haunt the moment, or maybe to interrupt it. Walking beside him was Christian Combs, Diddy's son. The two didn't smile, they didn't wave. They walked with quiet determination straight toward the metal detectors at the main entrance. Cameras exploded into action. Microphones pointed in their direction. Reporters called out questions. "Yeah, why are you here today? Are you testifying? Are you supporting Diddy?" Yeah didn't answer. Neither did Christian. They kept walking heads down. But when they reached the first checkpoint inside, everything stopped. Court officers looked over Ye's ID and motioned for him to step aside. A few words were exchanged in low tones, then slightly louder. Christian leaned in, speaking with a staff member. Ye remained composed, though his jaw tightened. A deputy explained, "You're not on the approved list for entry to the courtroom on the 26th floor." "What do you mean?" Ye asked, voice level. "I'm here for my brother." "I understand, but the defense has submitted a list. Only pre-approved names can go in. You're not one of them." The press pool caught some of this exchange. The sound of camera shutters continued. Ye looked toward the elevators, then toward Christian. No one moved to intervene on his behalf. According to sources inside the courthouse, one of Diddy's lead attorneys had specifically requested that no non-essential guests or associates, including high-profile individuals, be permitted in the main courtroom that day, even if they came with family, even if they were famous, even if they were Ye. The moment held. Security offered him an alternative. He could wait in a secondary overflow room on the 23rd floor, usually reserved for excess public observers or unregistered media. It had no screens, no video feed from the courtroom, just chairs, 4 white walls, and a closed door. Ye nodded once, slow and deliberate. He and Christian were escorted to the elevator. When the doors opened on the 23rd floor, there was no one else waiting. No reporters, no fans, just a government-assigned security guard standing by the doorway. The room was cold, unfurnished aside from a row of chairs. Ye sat down. Christian stood for a moment, then joined him. The two didn't speak much. The silence in that room stretched out long and uncomfortable. 20 minutes passed. No one approached them. No one invited them upstairs. No message from Diddy's legal team. No exception was made. Eventually, Christian stood again. He said something to Ye quietly. They both exited. By 10:14 a.m., the Maybach had pulled away from the courthouse, disappearing down Worth Street. Outside, the press reaction was immediate. Was Ye being silenced? Was this calculated? Why would Diddy's team block his entry? This wasn't just a random visit, not during a federal RICO trial. not when Diddy's empire was at stake, and certainly not when Ye was willing to show up in person. Some commentators speculated Ye's appearance could have unintended consequences. If he was called as a potential witness, willing or otherwise, it might complicate defense strategy. Others suggested that Ye may have known or seen things in the past that were now legally sensitive. Whatever the truth, the optics were clear. Ye came to support a man on trial for organized abuse, and that man's team didn't want him in the room. The public was left to guess why. Meanwhile, on the 26th floor, court was in session. The day's proceedings began without reference to the scene downstairs. Judge Feldstein entered promptly. Attorneys were already seated. Jurors had been instructed to avoid all media coverage, including the moment outside, that was already going viral on social platforms. "Let's proceed," the judge said plainly. The first witness was escorted in a senior Homeland Security agent, dressed in a suit, straight-backed, and carrying a thick folder. He had been part of the tactical team that executed the federal raid on Diddy's Los Angeles residence in 2024. What he described over the next hour would shake the courtroom. In his sworn testimony, the agent laid out the chain of events that led to the raid. Sealed affidavits, coordinated surveillance, anonymous witness statements, and encrypted tip lines pointing toward ongoing illegal activities involving weapons, narcotics, and coercive behavior. With the prosecution's permission, he presented photographic evidence recovered from the scene. One by one, images appeared on the courtroom monitor, boxed pallets of baby oil and lubricant stacked to the ceiling in a temperature-controlled garage, firearms including 2 semi-automatic rifles and a Glock pistol, one of which had a defaced serial number, a drum-style magazine loaded with 59 green-tipped bullets, military-grade armor-piercing, a Gucci travel pouch containing rolled currency and powdered substances, later confirmed to be controlled drugs, a locked cabinet holding encrypted drives, marked phones with missing SIM trays, and documents protected under seal. Gasps were audible. Jurors took notes quickly. One leaned forward, elbows resting on knees, but the agent wasn't finished. He recounted conversations with staff on site during the raid, some of whom mentioned events referred to internally as King Nights. The prosecution would return to that phrase later in the day. Back on the 23rd floor, the room Ye had briefly occupied was empty again. But downstairs, reporters were still buzzing. "What does Ye know?" one anchor asked live on air. "And why did Diddy's own team deny him access?" Theories multiplied. Some saw it as a power play. Others saw it as panic. But no one saw it as normal. For someone like Ye to show up dressed like he was ready for Judgment Day, or for the White Party and be denied entry, was not something anyone could explain away casually, especially when that same courtroom was now hearing testimony about locked rooms, drug kits, and storage racks filled with substances no one could explain the need for. By the end of day 23, the defense declined to respond publicly to Ye's visit. They remained focused on the legal fight inside. But court watchers, journalists, and online observers were already connecting the dots. The trial wasn't just about one man. It was about the system he built, the people he kept close, the silence that surrounded him, and perhaps most disturbingly, the ones he didn't want inside anymore, even if their name was Ye. The door to the 26th floor courtroom closed with a soft click. Ye had just been escorted to a holding room 2 floors below. His appearance, sudden and symbolic, had caused a stir outside. But within these walls, lined with marble columns, federal emblems, and a gallery packed with press and victims' advocates, attention was fixed on the witness stand. Judge Feldstein, a sharp-eyed man with a reputation for demanding order and detail, adjusted his reading glasses and gave the nod. Prosecutors rose without delay. "Your Honor, the government calls Special Agent Darren M. Lowry to the stand." The courtroom fell still. Agent Lowry, mid-40s, clean-cut, wearing a dark suit with a Homeland Security lapel pin, made his way forward. He stood with the quiet, trained posture of someone used to being under pressure. He raised his right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God, I do." He sat. What followed over the next 2 hours was a slow, meticulous unwrapping of what federal agents had found inside Sean Diddy Combs' Los Angeles compound during the 2024 raid. It was not delivered with drama. It didn't need to be. The evidence spoke for itself. Agent Lowry began with a timeline. The raid, he explained, was the result of an 11-month investigation involving multiple federal agencies. It had been approved by a federal judge following sealed affidavits from multiple cooperating witnesses, some of whom had once worked inside Diddy's inner circle. The warrant had authorized a full search of Diddy's Holmby Hills residence, main house, guest house, garages, storage units. Was this a standard entry, the prosecutor asked. No, Lowry said. This was considered a high-risk warrant. The target was known to have private armed security, and the property was expansive, multi-leveled, and equipped with surveillance blind spots. He continued. On the morning of March 14, 2024, at 5:03 a.m., Homeland Security Investigations HSI executed the warrant. The compound was surrounded. Entry was gained through the side gate. Diddy was not home at the time. House staff were present. Security guards were on duty. All were detained temporarily during the sweep. The courtroom remained silent as Lowry described the findings. "Let's talk about the garage," the prosecutor said. Lowry took a breath. In the west garage, he said, agents discovered industrial shelving units installed along all 3 walls. On these shelves were stacked boxes, neatly labeled, containing various personal products. He paused before continuing. "We documented and removed 900 individual bottles of Astroglide lubricant and 200 bottles of Johnson & Johnson baby oil." There were gasps in the gallery. The prosecutor held up a color photograph. It showed the garage in full detail, metal racks, 18 large cardboard boxes, stacked to the ceiling, labeled in black marker AG4, AG5, and so on. The room was sterile, cold, organized. Not what one would expect in a celebrity home. "Were these bottles opened or sealed?" the prosecutor asked. "They were sealed. Many were still shrink-wrapped in shipping pallets." "Would you describe this quantity as typical?" Lowry looked at the jury. "Absolutely not." Next came the weapons. A second photo was displayed, this one showing an open drawer inside a custom-built storage closet in the security wing of the home. Inside were several firearms, 2 AR-15 style rifles, a Glock 19 pistol, a tactical shotgun, a drum-style magazine capable of holding 60 rounds. One particular rifle, the agent explained, had its serial number intentionally scratched off, rendering it untraceable. This, he said, was a felony on its own. The ammunition green-tipped, armor-piercing. The courtroom tensed. "Were these firearms secured in a safe?" the prosecutor asked. "No. They were in a drawer, unlocked." Who had access, according to staff, Mr. Combs' private security team? The jury was visibly uncomfortable. Even for a celebrity of Diddy's stature, the scale and nature of the materials found raised questions. Why were there hundreds of bottles of personal lubricant and baby oil? Why military-grade ammunition? Why an untraceable rifle? No one in the room said the word intent, but everyone was thinking it. The next image changed everything. On the courtroom screen now appeared a photograph of what looked like a designer toiletry pouch, Gucci monogrammed, worn at the edges, placed on a nightstand. Agent Lowry confirmed it had been recovered from Diddy's master bedroom. Inside, several tightly rolled stacks of $100 bills, 2 vials of unidentified pills, later tested and confirmed to contain MDMA and benzodiazepines, a small plastic bag of white powder, a burner phone with no SIM card. This pouch, Lowry testified, had been mentioned by multiple witnesses before the raid. It was described as the pouch that had to be there during certain gatherings, known internally as King Nights. One of the jurors scribbled that phrase down in capital letters. The prosecution let the moment linger. Then they asked, was anything else found inside the home that suggested the use of these materials? Yes, Lowry replied. Several rooms had blackout curtains, adjustable lighting rigs, and mounted sound systems. One guest bedroom had walls lined with acoustic foam. Did you find any footage? Lowry nodded. We recovered 4 encrypted hard drives. Digital forensics is ongoing, but a preview of the unencrypted data showed multiple folders labeled with code names and dates. One folder was titled August Sessions BV Shore LM. The defense objected to speculation. The judge sustained, but the impression had already landed. Something was being curated, categorized, stored. Across the aisle, Diddy sat still, expressionless. He occasionally whispered to his attorney. His suit was pressed, his posture straight, but the energy around him had changed. This wasn't gossip. This was federal testimony, under oath, corroborated by physical evidence, by timelines, by items pulled from his bedroom drawers. No one could unsee what had just been shown. After a brief recess, the prosecution shifted gears. They began asking about how these materials, especially the substances and supplies, could relate to patterns of behavior. Were any staff members interviewed who had knowledge of these items? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Agent Lowry said. We spoke to 3 former assistants, 2 house staff, and 1 contracted technician. All stated that these items were present for at least 3 years. Many believed they were used for specific late-night gatherings hosted by Mr. Combs. The prosecutor nodded, then stepped aside. The judge turned to the defense. Your witness. Defense attorney Brian Steele rose from his seat. He walked slowly toward the witness stand. Agent Lowry, he began, voice calm. You're a trained federal officer with years of experience, correct? Yes. Have you conducted searches of celebrity homes before? Yes. In your experience, have you ever found large quantities of skincare products, personal lubricants, or spa items? Not to this degree, no. But you would agree that being wealthy means having the means to buy in bulk, correct? In general, yes. And would you agree that many celebrities maintain security teams and may own firearms legally? Yes. And in this case, were any of the weapons registered to Mr. Combs? Lowry hesitated. Some were registered to his security company. Did you find any documentation that Mr. Combs personally used those firearms? Number Steele continued, you found drugs in the house, but were they bagged for sale? Labeled for distribution, no. Then would you agree that what was found suggests personal use rather than trafficking? I can't say definitively. Steele nodded. Of course you can't, because the law doesn't convict based on assumption. He sat down. It was a strong moment for the defense. But the jury had seen the photos, and photos don't lie, especially when they show 900 bottles of lubricant stacked like merchandise, especially when one of those guns has no serial number, especially when the pouch described by 3 different witnesses shows up exactly where they said it would be. As court adjourned that afternoon, the mood was unsettled. Outside, the media still chased Ye's story. Inside, the focus was sharpening. The prosecution was building a portrait not of a man who made mistakes, but of a man who built an environment, a system where control was absolute and secrecy was survival. And this day had stripped away more than just legal arguments. It had stripped away illusion. The truth once hidden in gated mansions and dim hotel rooms was now up on courtroom screens, the kind you don't forget. The courtroom felt different, not louder, not more crowded, but heavier. The kind of heaviness that comes not from chaos, but from a shared unspoken understanding. Something serious was about to be said. Jonathan Perez took the stand just after 10 a.m. on day 23. He was Diddy's former personal assistant. Young, mid-30s, professionally dressed, composed. He didn't enter with fear. He entered with purpose. The courtroom was watching. So was the press. So were survivors seated in the back, including at least 2 women who had testified in prior weeks. Perez had been granted limited use immunity. That meant he wouldn't be prosecuted based on what he said in court today, as long as he told the truth. This arrangement was not handed out lightly. It meant federal prosecutors believed he had something valuable, something structural, and they were right. Mr. Perez, the prosecutor, began, "Can you explain to the court how you became employed by Mr. Combs?" "I was hired as a junior assistant in 2021. At first, my duties were administrative, scheduling, coordinating travel, sometimes driving. And did those duties change over time?" "They did." "How so?" "There were tasks outside the job description, errands, requests, some of which I was told not to write down." "What kind of tasks?" There was a pause. "And then the first time it was said out loud, I was asked to help prepare certain nights. They were referred to as king nights." The words echoed in the courtroom. A juror glanced up sharply. Reporters' pens scratched harder against paper. "Can you define king nights?" the prosecutor asked. "They were nights where Mr. Combs would host private gatherings. These were not public events. No press, no social media, no staff documentation. Only certain people were allowed in. The setting was carefully controlled lights, sound, security. What was your role?" "I would scout the location in advance. Usually a hotel suite. Sometimes a private residence rented under a different name." "What kind of setup was required?" Perez began listing red LED lighting panels positioned to create a warm, low-visibility environment. Portable speakers or custom sound systems preloaded with Diddy's curated playlists. Specific types of furniture, including soft floor bedding and blackout curtains. Refrigerated beverages, including alcohol and clear liquids in unlabeled glass bottles, and a designer pouch. "Always the same one." "The Gucci bag," the prosecutor said. "Yes," Perez nodded. "That bag had to be there." "What was inside it?" "Cash, pills, small powder containers, vape pens, sometimes phones I didn't recognize." The courtroom was dead quiet. "Were there other staff involved in these nights?" the prosecutor asked. "Sometimes, but not many. Only those who had worked with him for a long time, or people who had signed strict NDAs, and the women escorted in separately. Some were flown in. Travel was booked by Mr. Combs' private travel coordinator using burner cards. I didn't ask questions, but I knew not all of them wanted to be there." "How did you know?" Perez hesitated. "You can tell when someone's scared," he said quietly, "or when someone's pretending they're not." The prosecutor then directed attention to a printed exhibit. "Mr. Perez, this is a copy of an internal chat between you and Christina Carorm, Chief of Staff, for Mr. Combs. Do you recognize it?" "I do." "Can you read the message you received on March 8th? Perez looked down, took a breath, and read, "Tonight's off. Make sure that clip is gone. Bring anything like that directly to me from now on." "And what was that referring to?" "A video. Describe the video." Perez looked straight ahead. It was footage from one of the king nights. It wasn't supposed to exist. I had transferred files off an AV laptop we used for lighting effects. One of the folders had a short clip. Just under a minute. It showed a woman, Jade, and another man in the hotel suite. She looked detached. The lighting was red. There was no audio. "Did you report it?" "I showed it to Christina. She told me to delete it." "I did." "Was that the only video you ever saw?" "Yes. But it made me wonder if there were others." The room shifted. This wasn't just testimony anymore. This was a map, a structure, a code of operation that involved travel agents, bag handlers, lighting crews, and a chief of staff directing what should or shouldn't exist. The prosecutor pressed further. "Did you ever receive instructions not to speak about these nights?" "Yes. It was always clear. Nothing was written down. Any text would disappear after 24 hours. I was told it was just part of protecting the lifestyle." "Did you feel safe?" Perez paused. "Not really," he admitted, "but I also didn't think I could walk away. At least not without consequences. Why, there was always this message unspoken but understood: you owe him. He gave you a chance. If you cross him, you're done." The defense stood up to cross-examine. Attorney Brian Steele approached slowly, cautiously. "Mr. Perez," he began, "you stated earlier that you were not paid extra for these duties, correct?" "Correct." Then is it fair to say you were never officially asked to perform them as part of your job? They weren't on the contract, no. Were you ever coerced or forced to do them? No physical coercion, no. So you chose to participate, I chose to stay. That's not the same thing. Steele tilted his head. Did Mr. Combs ever threaten you? No, but he didn't have to. The room was tense again. Steele tried to pivot. So you're saying that your participation in setting up these King Knights makes Mr. Combs guilty of a federal crime? No, Perez said calmly. I'm saying the pattern shows control, structure, planning. I was one of the gears. I'm not the machine. It was a defining moment. The defense had attempted to argue detachment distance between Diddy and the acts being described, but Perez didn't waver, and he wasn't alone. Throughout his testimony, multiple earlier statements from other witnesses had aligned. The pouch was real. The lighting setup was specific. The drugs were always present, but never out in the open. The women were not random. The silence around these events was maintained at all costs. This wasn't chaos. This was control. The prosecutor redirected for one final question. Mr. Perez, why are you testifying today? He looked at the jury. Because silence is how this went on for so long, and I was part of that silence. I want that to stop. By the time court adjourned that afternoon, something had changed. No one left the room speaking casually. Even the reporters walked slower, more carefully. The phrase King Knights was now part of the record, not as rumor, not as accusation, but as the foundation of a system that had hidden in plain sight for years. And the man who helped build it, he just started to tear it down. The courtroom was already on edge after Jonathan Perez's testimony. The red lights, the carefully curated music, the pouch with pills and powders, the silence, the secrecy. Now on the same day, federal prosecutors returned with something just as damaging but less dramatic on the surface logistics. They weren't just interested in the nights themselves, but how they were made possible. Who booked the rooms? Who carried the bag? Who made sure the right materials arrived at the right place at the right time? It wasn't about just one assistant anymore. The prosecution was about to show it wasn't an isolated favor, it was a system. The first testimony came from someone who had already been on the stand earlier in the trial, Mia, a former assistant whose identity was protected under a pseudonym. When she returned to testify this time, it was to clarify what she had been asked to do and when. The prosecutor started simply, "Did Mr. Combs ever ask you to pick up or deliver substances for him?" "Yes," Mia answered quietly. "How many times? Too many to count." "What kinds of substances?" He didn't call them by name. "Sometimes," he said, "the usual. Sometimes he sent someone else with instructions. I later realized it was likely cocaine or ecstasy. I found wrappers. I saw what it did to people." "Were you paid extra?" "No." "Then why did you agree to do it?" "Because he was my employer. And saying no meant you might not be working there much longer." She looked toward the jury, voice steady. "You don't say no to someone like him. You just do the job. And you hope they don't get mad." Capricorn Clark, known to those in Diddy's circle as Capri, was once more than an assistant. She had been close. Very close. Some even described her as like family. But her testimony that day would draw a line between familiarity and control. She had been called to clarify details about a specific night in Miami when she allegedly delivered a black duffel bag to Diddy's suite. "What was in the bag?" the prosecutor asked. "I never opened it, but he called me after and thanked me for the delivery." "Did he say what it was?" "He said, 'You came through Cap, like always.'" "Was this the only time?" "No. There were many deliveries, different cities, sometimes for him, sometimes for people he introduced me to." "Did you ask what you were transporting?" "No. That's not something you ask in that world." The jury listened in silence as she described the pattern. She wasn't on salary. She was paid in gifts, concert access, opportunities, and sometimes nothing at all, but still she delivered. And in her words, delivering meant you stayed close to power. The final assistant to take the stand that afternoon was Jane. Her story was already a focal point of the prosecution emotional complex, and central to several trafficking charges. But what prosecutors brought out now was something different: her role in the movement of materials. Jane, the prosecutor said gently, "Did you ever deliver anything for Mr. Combs?" She nodded. "To where hotel rooms, private suites. Occasionally to planes." "What kind of items?" "The Gucci pouch. A black box with metal latches, sometimes envelopes." "Did you ever open them?" "No. But I knew what they were for." She looked down for a moment. "One time I asked if he wanted me to check what was inside to make sure it was correct. He said, 'Don't ask. Just carry it like you're proud to.' Did that scare you?" She nodded again. "But you kept doing it?" "Yes. One assistant delivering drugs or materials could be brushed off as a bad decision. Maybe even a misunderstanding. 2 would raise eyebrows. 3, that looked like a network." The prosecutor wasted no time connecting the dots. He held up a chart, simple but devastating. At the center, Sean "Diddy" Combs radiating outward Mia, who delivered unknown substances from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, booked under alias. Capri, who transported duffel bags to Miami, Houston, and Atlanta. No manifest, no receipts. Jane, who repeated deliveries to hotels, private events, and recording studios. Always instructed to stay quiet. All 3 said they were not paid for the deliveries. All 3 said they were doing it to stay on Diddy's good side. All 3 used the word fear. Defense attorney Xavier Donaldson stood. He took a slow walk across the courtroom before facing the jury. "Let me ask you this," he said to Mia. "If you weren't forced to do anything, weren't under contract to deliver anything, and weren't paid to do anything, then whose choice was it?" She looked at him calmly. "I didn't say it was free will. I said it was fear." He tried a different angle with Capri. "Ms. Clark, you said you never opened the bags, correct?" "Yes." "Then you have no proof what was in them, no proof, just knowledge. And Jane, you also admit that you were never threatened directly." "No. He didn't need to threaten. Because you wanted to help him." "No," she replied. "Because I didn't want to disappear." The defense attorney scoffed gently as if trying to show disbelief, but the jury wasn't laughing. Before court recessed, the prosecution made one final statement. It wasn't theatrical, it was precise. "This case is not about one assistant doing a favor," the prosecutor said. "It is about a distributed system of control, a web that allowed the defendant to operate across cities, states, even countries without ever putting his name on a manifest or his hand on a bag." He looked at the jury. These witnesses were not on payroll. They were not part of a traditional organization. But that's exactly the point. It was never supposed to look organized. That's how you hide a network in plain sight. Silence followed. Everyone in the courtroom was thinking the same thing. What looks like chaos from the outside may actually be coordination. As this day drew to a close, it was clear that the trial was shifting. No longer focused solely on shocking behavior or disturbing recordings, it was now becoming a case about infrastructure. How do powerful people move things? Who do they trust to carry it? And how does fear, social, professional, and psychological, get weaponized as a tool of silence? His denied entry earlier that day had made headlines. But inside the courtroom, the real story was unfolding in the details. The deliveries, the silence, the invisible contracts, and above all, the system built on favors. That looked a lot like coercion. The courtroom grew tense as a new witness took the stand, Eddie Garcia, a former hotel security manager. Under oath, he told the jury about an incident in 2016, one that involved a hotel security camera, a hallway, and a violent confrontation between Diddy and Cassie Ventura. There was footage, Garcia said. It showed Mr. Combs striking Ms. Ventura near the elevator. "What happened to the footage?" the prosecutor asked. Garcia paused, then answered, "It was deleted." After he handed me a brown paper bag with $100,000 in cash, he said, "You're my angel." I didn't feel like one. The courtroom fell silent, but what followed next shook the room even more. The prosecution played a recorded phone call between Diddy and Jane, made in late 2023, shortly after Jane filed her initial lawsuit. In the audio, Diddy's voice was calm, almost soothing. He didn't deny anything. Instead, he reframed her memories. "You know that wasn't what really happened. You were hurt, yeah, but I never forced anything. You wanted to be close. That's why you stayed." Jane's voice cracked on the tape. "You said if I told anyone, I'd never work again." The call ended with Diddy saying, "Let's just keep this between us." It was, as the prosecutor called it, a consciousness of guilt. Jane, Cassie, Mia. 3 different women, 3 different lives. But they all shared the same through line: they were controlled, silenced, and eventually made to doubt their own truth. Until now. Court recessed just after 4 p.m. Outside, the scene was chaotic. Press activists and onlookers flooded the plaza. Some were still talking about his car, his outfit, his brief appearance. But most were focused on the real headline, the evidence: weapons, drugs, deleted videos, silenced women. Inside, Diddy never once looked toward the gallery where had been expected to sit. He didn't look at the press. He didn't even glance at the jury as he exited with his lawyers. But the court of public opinion wasn't exiting. Social media exploded with clips from the audio. Headlines broke within minutes. $100,000 bribed to delete Cassie footage. Diddy's recorded call to Jane revealed in court. Ex-assistants detail drug deliveries and control. Though the trial paused for the weekend, the conversation didn't. Day 23 had changed everything. It didn't just hint at misconduct. It mapped out a structure of power, silence, and fear. And even as the courtroom doors closed, the public had already heard enough.